Hello everyone. So today's live stream will be kind of from the seat of my pants. I have a basic topic in mind. I have a couple things I want to discuss with you today. And I also want to mention, so I'm going to start with that right from the beginning, that today is Caitlin's birthday. And so that makes me a little bit more on edge. I made a list of things that I knew she loved, and I thought I'd share them with you if that's okay. I thought maybe you'd appreciate it or think, hey, those are things I like too, and we could kind of think about her today and put out some positive energy for her, even though it won't bring her back. But yeah, some of my friends already reached out to me yesterday because I knew today was her birthday. So today she would have turned 34. And a lot of people keep saying, well, what happened? I still don't have an answer from the medical examiner. My heart is with her mother today, who is definitely feeling tons of pain. And I couldn't sleep last night. I don't know. I went to bed at what I consider a decent hour and was just kind of tossing for 3 or 4 hours before I finally fell asleep. I didn't close the door. Jack may join us. We'll see. If she does, I'll put her on camera for a second because that was Caitlin's baby. She loved that dog. So let me just start off with that. I'm going to talk about her for a couple minutes. If you're new to this channel, you're like, what is this about? This isn't about aquariums. Well, Caitlin was very important to me, and she was part of my aquarium, part of this channel, and back February 13th, she died. So I was writing a list of all the things she loved, just kind of so I wouldn't leave things out. And the first thing, of course, and they're not in any particular order than whatever order my brain came up with, but her family was super important to her. She loved her family, and she loved Jack. And Jack went with her everywhere. This is a Staffordshire Terrier that she rescued, who picked Caitlin out when she went to go looking for a dog. And she got her as a tiny puppy. She was adorable. She came to visit me with Jack, and she had this huge rope on the collar. I mean, just this giant rope, like, I don't know what you would tie that to. It was like to hold a boat to the dock. Here's Jack. Here's Jack. Come on, Jack, where's your face? Turn around, you're on camera, everyone's looking at your butt. All right, let me get that correct. Jack. Hey, look, everyone's looking at you. All right, so that's why I didn't give her own webcam today. I had a feeling she would not cooperate. She loved dogs, she loved fish, she loved marine fish, she loved mice. And she would name every single creature. All of the mice, she had like 7 or 8 mice. Now, why did she have mice? Because she worked at Petco and she didn't want the mice to turn into rat food, snake food. She felt bad for them when someone would show up to turn them in. And so she would adopt them and bring them home, and she ended up having 1 or 2 tanks filled with mice in her bedroom, and each one had a name. It was really cute. She loved New York. I can't emphasize that enough. It was her everything. She grew up there. She lived there her whole life, and everything mattered about New York. And half the TV shows we watched together were located in New York. She really did. One of her favorite foods was sushi, but she always had a rule: don't ever eat that in front of the aquarium. Thought that was kind. She had a ton of TV shows she liked. She loved Friends. She loved The Office, Schitt's Creek. She was into the Harry Potter movies, and what else did she have? Oh, the Disney movies. The pair that we really liked was Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. So those were a couple that were really important. She loved Comic-Con. Didn't get to go very often because it's very hard to get in. But I believe she went to one of the ones in New York. I always went to the one in San Diego. We were hoping to go to one here in the coming year or two. She loved to cook. And when she cooked, she liked to change the recipe. So whatever it said on the box, she'd enhance it. And she'd throw things in. And she would always say, well, this is probably going to be terrible. And usually it was really good. Sometimes I didn't like it. I mean, that's going to be honest. But most of the time it was very good. She loved things that were spicy. And me, not so much. She loved a beautiful garden filled with flowers, filled with lush growth. The more birds, the better. If there were skippies, which are what she nicknamed the squirrels because they skip through the yard. Bunnies, she would name them. That was her. She loved going out, and she'd send me videos where she would be petting these little bunnies and these birds would come into her hand, where I'm just like, how are you doing this? And it was so impressive. She would just wait, and they'd come to her, or she would go near their nest, and she would kind of get up close and personal. One of her favorite daily TV shows was Kelly and Ryan, which is on Fox. And so we've been watching that together, and actually I'm still watching it because it reminds me of her. She enjoyed decorating for all the different holidays. She was always buying stuff for the next one coming up. I don't know what you buy for Memorial Day weekend, but she would have found something that was appropriate, probably a small flag or something. But she really did enjoy the decor and to keep things changing all the time, where it was just, you had to be on your toes. You had to be ready to move something away and put something else up in that spot. Her colors that she loved, it was kind of funny. This line, I believe, came from The Office. Angela, was one of her things she would say is that her favorite colors are black, charcoal, gray. And Caitlin says, that's so me. And she did. She really liked the dark colors, and she wouldn't mind putting bright things in front of it, colorful things, but you never heard her say, oh, I just love blue, or I just love red. It was always, black and gray. So she was big on organizing things. She was big on getting the perfect gift. She was very thoughtful in that way, and she would really think of what the person would want to receive. She loved to write, and so well versed in English language. It was incredible. I loved reading her blogs and reading her stories. And when she was working on a presentation years ago, I was reading her slides, and they were so good, but I said, you can't read your slides to the audience. You have to look at them, and if you're sitting there reading, you can just email them the PDF. It's just not going to work that way. But man, she had so much fun with the English language. She liked to travel. Didn't get to do it nearly as much as she wanted to. COVID definitely put a dent on that as well, but I know she really enjoyed her time in Hawaii. I'm going to throw her picture on the screen here for a moment while I'm talking about this. See if that cooperates. There we go. I am on the list. She loved me. She loved pillows, and she'd buy so many of them, and they were always everywhere. And there was a different one for a different occasion at all times. We bought this one giant, fluffy, super soft pillow that looks like a dog that's supposed to sit on the sofa, and she bought that for Jack. And when I felt how soft it was, like, nope, this one's mine. And so that is actually one that I lean on when watching TV. And she agreed it was super nice and snuggly to snuggle into versus, a typical square pillow. She loved the Backstreet Boys, and she loved being outdoors. From New York, there was several foods she kept telling me were only good there and nowhere else. New York pizza, New York bagels, rainbow cookies I'd never even heard of, and so her mother shipped us some so I could try them out, and that was one of her favorites. She loved to get the ginormous blueberries at Costco, and the avocados were always super ripe there. She'd light candles all the time. She was always Googling anything. You never saw her without her phone nearby where she could look something up. And she wanted to verify because she wanted to be right. She did not want to be wrong about anything, and occasionally she'd be wrong, and I would win that one, but for the most part she was usually right. She had a funny snack that I doubt many people eat, but she really enjoyed it, and that was to eat frozen peas, literally frozen, like ice cream. She'd have this bowl of frozen peas, and she just popped them in her mouth while watching TV, and I always thought that was fun. And you know what? They were actually kind of sweet, but I didn't quite jump on board with her on that one. One of the things she did so much was walk on her tippy toes all the time, like a ballerina, and she loved ballet and ballerinas, but she was always on her tippy toes, and so a lot of people always assumed that she was a dancer at some point, and she said she didn't know why she did it. Well, Jack has stepped on my feet a few times, and I'm starting to think that's really smart. She's on her tippy toes, so her feet were safe. Maybe that's what was going on. She loved the snow, and of course, what goes better with snow than hot chocolate and fireplaces? So those were a couple of things that she really enjoyed. And then games, any kind of a game, board games, contest, trivia, puzzles, that kind of stuff she loved, and she couldn't wait to get together with people to do that. And she loved tiny things. So she would take, she'd make a plate, and she'd have a tiny little fork to eat the food with, or, she liked with chopsticks, for example, and things like that. And it was just, she loved the little things around her. Rather than having a big mug of something, she would have a little tiny cup or a little tiny glass. And it's funny because I love tiny things. So that was another thing we had in common. So that was kind of our the list I could come up with, and I'm sure she could add more to that if she was here. She definitely loved crime drama, like murder mysteries or murder documentaries. She was very enthralled by that stuff. And I remember one point I gave her a crime book. I might have to mute us here for a second. Okay, yeah, maybe we'll be okay. I gave her a puzzle book that was like solve the crime with, you know, crosswords and circle the letters and stuff. I don't know. She looks like she's going to start barking like crazy. Let me let her outside. I'm going to put a video up on the screen. And this time I'm going to put myself on mute on purpose, but I'll be right back. All right, so last week I accidentally realized, or didn't know until later, that if I take my face off the screen, my audio goes away. So I apologize that I did that for like 8 minutes last week near the end, and I did it a little bit earlier in the video as well. That was an oops, and I didn't realize it until after the show was over, or near the end I kind of figured out. I was like, hey, you guys can't hear me? And I fixed it. So I'm happy that that was able to be done. Let's see. I don't want that. I want just me. Hey, come back here. I did grab a live shot of the reef for you as well with the trusty webcam. It doesn't look any good, but I did want to throw it up on the screen. And I've got something to show you guys. So that's it. I mean, if I talk about her some more, I can't help it. She was my everything. But I don't know. I am doing the best I can. And I think a lot of people are doing the best they can. A lot of people lose someone they love dearly. I did want to share with you my desktop. And that's one of the reasons the stream started a little bit late today, because it literally won't show my desktop. I have no idea why. I tried repeatedly. I can't figure out what's going on. When I try to share like Chrome or Safari, I get a black box. And there's nothing there to show you, so I can't do that. And I don't think it's going to suddenly work now that we're live. Let me go ahead just for fun. Try this. Yeah, that's a black box. That's not going to work. So I'm going to tell you about something you can look up. I'll put a link in this video description to get you there. But the tour I was going to give you of a website is today. I don't know why. I hate that. It's like I was actually making sure everything was working right and gathering all my stuff for today's live stream, and then it wouldn't work. I'm like, really? Why? And I'm looking at everything, and I don't know what's changed from last week, and I was like, all right, so we're not going to be doing that. But I wanted to show you this. So this is from last night. That is the measure of my nitrate. Now, you might say, hey, that's pretty good, but that's because this test kit is lying. That is not my nitrate. My nitrate's much higher than that. I am going to return that test kit to the fish store and have them hand me another one. But yeah, so I did do my measurements last night instead of today. I was in a mood, and I thought, let me just do that. So alkalinity was 9 DKH. Phosphates was 1.0. Calcium was 400. Magnesium 1500. You saw the fake nitrate number. Temperature was 78.3. pH was 8.21, and ORP was 355. So overall, tank's doing well. I dosed Phosphate RX last night to knock down the phosphate. It's probably 0.5 at this point. And I was going to measure before the stream, but then when I couldn't make the software show up, I thought, let me see if I can figure that out. But it didn't happen. I also wanted to tell you about something that I'm thinking about doing. So I'll just throw this on the screen. So these are the nano nems that I have been growing in the anemone cube for a long time. I got one from a hobbyist many years ago. He says, Mark, you have to get one of these bubble tips. They stay small forever. They're awesome. They're great for small tanks. And I must have about 100 too many. There are so many. They're all over the glass. They're all inside my main reef, and I need to start removing them. And I've got one more picture of them to show you. This is a couple inside the frag tank along with a ton of Mahanos. But you can see how pretty they are. And this is under a couple of different lightings. I've also got them under normal lighting as well if you want to see them that way. But they're greenish, they have striation, their tips are kind of bluish purplish. They're really, really pretty. I remember I gave a few to my friend AJ to put in his tank years ago. And when we took them out of my anemone cube, you know, they were kind of eh. And he says, man, those things are gorgeous. Why do they look so bad in your tank? And I just assumed it was my choice of lighting, that I need to go ahead and put something else, you know, some kind of other spectrum on the tank. And so I did. I made some adjustments to make these glow a little bit nicer, and they do. But there are, you know, depending on the lighting, they will either look fantastic or they will look a little bit more boring. But they never get bigger than maybe 3 inches across. They can have tiny bubbles, as you can see in this picture in the lower right. There are bubbles on it, or they may be a very long tentacle, just like all my other bubble tips in my system. So I just wanted to let you know that what my plan is to sell those to you guys. And my plan is, because I'm not a livestock vendor, I sell dry goods. I'm going to look up what it costs to ship things overnight. I'm pretty sure it's going to be between 50 and 80 bucks, somewhere in the United States. And that's what it really costs. And I'll be looking, I'm going to double check this, but I'm just kind of talking you through this process. So I was thinking, if I were to sell these, I might sell them for maybe $150, $175 shipped. And that way you get the anemone plus one item out of my main reef in your box. And the trick is keeping the box small, keeping it light, and shipping it probably in the next week or two. So that way we can still do it before the weather gets crazy hot. We're at the point right now where you don't need a heat pack, we don't need an ice pack, but that's going to change really quick as we head into summer. So if you're interested in getting something from me, from one of these anemones or a coral, you can email me at sales@milevsreef.com. I should probably put that on the screen. I haven't added words on here manually in forever. Let's see, sales@milevsreef.com. Add. Ha! It worked. So I'll just put this right here. And so if you want to let me know, just put in the subject, anemone, and that way I will not miss it. But I'm planning to just, figure out the best way to get them out to you. And you know what? If something goes wrong, I know everyone's like, well, what if I get dead stuff? Well, I have enough to give you another, but I'm not going to pay for shipping twice. So if you're determined, if something really, really were to go wrong, and you want to pay shipping again, I'll do it. But I don't plan to just be this plethora of, oh yeah, no problem, I'll just send you another box on all my costs. I'm not going to do that. And that's just me protecting me. But I don't anticipate problems. I'm actually really good at shipping livestock when I have to do it. I have shipped a few anemones over the years, and they got there very safely. And I always ship, I get them to FedEx just before 6 p.m. before the pickup time is hit, and it arrives at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning the next day, which is the minimal amount of time you have the livestock in water, in bags, in a cooler. And so I won't ship it to arrive on a Friday. I don't want to take any chance of getting stuck over the weekend. It would be something where I'd want to ship it out like on a Tuesday or Wednesday. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing with those guys. And if you're interested, let me know. And I will, I don't know, do something. I'll create an invoice I can send you. We'll take care of the transaction, and I will get these out to as many of you as you want. And I actually want more of you to have them, because not very many people have them. Their main color is greenish. I said they stay small and they split, so you could end up having many of them one day, like me. But they're really nice, and clownfish do host in them. I have watched, or no, I'm sorry, they host the clownfish. I said that backwards. I watched the skunks swim in and out of them all the time, the skunk clownfish, and my anemone cube is filled with ocellaris. So you have that to look forward to, and I think that it would be really cool to have them in your tanks, because if for some reason that tank were to completely crash, and my main reef were to crash with it, let's say I had a catastrophic disaster, they'd be gone unless anyone else has one. And very, very few people have this exact type of bubble tip anemone. Little tiny guys, really, really cute. All right, let me let Jack back in. I'm going to switch this back to the video again, and I'll put myself on mute for a moment. All right, can you hear me now? I think everything's working again. Yeah, that looks good. And we'll take this off the screen and we'll put me back up there. Okay, so I shared a picture of my tank yesterday on Facebook from 2011. So here is that picture. Now, this was my 400 gallon that had been set up for 3 months. I set it up in February. I put livestock in February of 2011. And back then, that was my aquascape. And that's actually pretty much what my aquascape is to this day. It hasn't changed much. It's basically a couple of horseshoes. The rockwork does not go up more than halfway up into the tank. It had a deep sand bed. It had the MP60s that are still what I'm running. As you guys know from last week's show, I bought a couple of new ones to replace the 10-year-old ones. There was an MP40, and then on the far right at the top corner of the tank, inside the water, you can see a couple of penductors. Those were replaced with the, well, that's the whole point. They were what created all the flow across the surface. And then above the tank were VHOs and metal halides. That tank had 5 drains, all 1.5 inches, and it was sitting on a steel stand. Now, what I wanted to navigate you to was the blog I did about this tank back in 2010 and 2011. And, well, actually, for several years, maybe up to 2013 or something. I blogged about the tank on reefaddicts.com. So, since I can't share my browser, this is the website that you would go to. And if you just click on it, and, you know, enter, it'll take you to, and then if you scroll to the very, that website belongs to me. It's something doing pretty well. It embraced the blog environment that before anyone liked blogs. I was pushing people should blog instead of type on forums, and I was recommending that, you know, people come to this website and use the blogs because you could write a huge long post, share 100 pictures, and then hit save, and you'd have all of your message in one post instead of having to break it up in multiple posts and go across multiple pages and have people interrupt you as you're in the middle of telling a story. You could do your whole thought, hit save, and then people could comment underneath. And I just thought that's the future of communication. I thought that was the way to go. So anyway, I set up this website. It has some articles on the front page. And at the very bottom of the web page, there is a URL, which I'll stick on the screen for you as well. 1 second here. And this will just be so you guys will know what you're looking for or give you something to copy, to type in. So I will paste this one on here. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Copy link. No, it's doing the words. All right, hang on a second here. Oh, that's no fun. All right, well, let me do this. Now I've got it. All right. So here is the very long URL. I'm going to put it down low so it's sitting on a black background. reefaddicts.com/blog.php/2-melev. That is my entire blog on Reef Addicts, and there are hundreds of blogs. And what you want to do is you want to jump to the very last page of my blog and work your way forward from there. That way you're going systematically day by day or week by week to learn about how the tank was set up, how everything was built. I go into enormous detail on this website. And this stuff actually is not on melevsreef.com. It's all buried into reefaddicts.com. So if you have a desire to really dig in there and learn how it was set up and what all I did and why I did it and what didn't work and what did work, it all is going to be inside that website. It's just buried with tons of data. So I'm recommending that it's going to work. Let's see. Someone's saying they're getting broken sound. But everything looks right to me, so I don't know. Let me do a type in here really quick. I hate it when things don't work right. I mean, it looks correct on my screen. It doesn't look like I'm blowing it out. I can't listen to the show and do the show at the same time. Let me try something. I'm going to hop on YouTube on my phone. Give me a second here just to see what you're seeing. I'm going to... I sound like me. Up on YouTube on my phone. All right, I'm going to try... Andrea says, it says, you're moving around. I will try not to move around. I'm not sure. I put the receiver on the desk where I'm not touching it, so it doesn't touch my body, and maybe it won't be pressing on the connection. So thank you for pointing that out, guys. All right, let me come back here. So... close that off, and I can get rid of this. I mean, if you can't find it, it's at the bottom of reefaddicts.com. The benefit of seeing how that was all done and to learn how the tank was set up will help you figure out what you want to do with your own tank. It might help you overcome a problem that has occurred with your tank and that you wish you could correct. And so it's nice to kind of see a bunch of pictures and some really good detailed information that you can reference as you're trying to set up or improve your current setup. So someone said, what all do you think you've changed over the past 10 years? And I thought, wow, that is so many things. There are, from the bottom up, I've changed so much. So first of all, the aquarium itself even got changed. After 13 months, it sprung a leak, and I had to break it down, drain it, clean it, box it up, crate it, ship it back, have it repaired, wait forever, got it back, put it back on the stand. And that wait from when it leaked to when it was set up again was 18 months. And that is the tank that you guys are seeing now that I tell you is 7.5 years old. It all started in February of 2011, but it got restarted in November of 2013. I think that's right. And so now, equipment-wise, let's just talk about the return pump. I started off with a couple of sequence dart pumps. One was the return pump, and one was the manifold pump. And there was very intricate plumbing to run all the gear from these two pumps. And I even installed valves to make it easier. If one pump were to fail, I could switch one valve and redivert water to the other line and keep the tank flowing nonstop. In the meantime, I switched from that, and I did not like repairing the dart pumps. They were an external pump, very quiet, but the seals would go out on them, and I had to keep replacing seals. And to do that, you have to take the pump off, disconnect the plumbing, deal with the water coming out of the sump, some way or fashion, and then take the pump apart, rip out the old seals, put the new ones in, put it back together. It was a whole ordeal. Nothing you wanted to do on purpose. It wasn't something you look forward to doing. And invariably, I would get Bobby involved, who's my tank sitter, and say, hey, it's time to do seals. And he's like, no problem, on my way over, because he was just really good at it. And eventually, I got away from the darts, and I switched over to the Abyss pump. Now, the Abyss pump is a German-made pump. It came on the scene, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, and it's got a 10-year warranty, and I've been running it for years, probably 3 or 4 years. I really like it. It's dead silent, and you could run it internally or externally, and I just put it inside the sump, but and it's been sitting there ever since. And occasionally I take it apart to clean it. The protein skimmer that I was running when I set up the 400 gallon was a big, huge Reef protein skimmer with 2 Eheim 1262 pumps. And I'd been running that skimmer for years on the 280 gallon and then later on the 400. And when I finally took it out of commission, I think I'd run it a total of 14 years. And when I switched to the Nios 300. And I've been running the Nios 300 ever since. The sump itself that I'd built for that tank back in 2010 was finally replaced about 2.5 years ago, probably 2. And I made a whole new one with a slightly different configuration because I wanted to try out some new things. And I wanted to create, I had made a huge amount of space for the Reef that I no longer was running. So I made the skimmer section a little smaller that could accommodate the Nios skimmer, but it also gave me room for the Clarisea or for my modular sock box. I put a shelf on there for the Trident automatic water tester. And I changed the return zone that was all hidden in the back inside the fish room. I actually lengthened it to come all the way to the front by making the refugium less long, so I could actually see how much water was in the return zone from the front of the tank. And it's very nice to be able to just stand in front of the reef and just glance down, and you see the macroalgae, and you look slightly to the right, and you can see the water line in the sump and make sure that the water is at the correct height where its normal height always is. And if it was lower for some weird reason, I could see it from the living room side as well as from the fish room side. And typically that required that I would need to clean off a sensor on the top-off kit that I use. So, top-off. I had a different top-off vessel that I made initially. I made a 3/8 cast acrylic. I used every square inch of space I had. It was so big that when I was ready to install it, I had to slide it into the stand, drop it down into between the steel frame, and then slide it into place where there was less than the thickness of my finger between it and the top of the stand, which was fine. I didn't plan to reach in it ever. But if you had to do anything like replace the pump for the top-off system, or I don't know, scoop water out or anything, you couldn't. There was no room. So when I replaced the sump a couple of years ago, I replaced the top-off container with one a little bit smaller, with an easier port to access within, to reach in. And it held a few less gallons, but not enough to change my life whatsoever. I think the first one held 43 gallons. The second one holds 41, 43, something like that. It's just a slight difference, just a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter, to where I could actually, if I needed to remove it, I could. Because the only way to get that top-off container out was to remove the pumps, disconnect the plumbing, remove the sump, and then slide the top-off container up and out, which was crazy. And I knew if that thing ever failed, I'd have to do all that work, or I'd have to take a Sawzall and just cut the darn thing in half to get it out in 2 pieces. And so when I was replacing the sump, I said, this is a perfect time. Let me just take care of this top-off container. So I replaced that during the last 10 years. I used to use, originally, I set up a top-off system with a thing called Deluxe Top It Off, which was a kit that takes you about an hour to build. And you have this relay, and I used an aqua lifter, and I had a float switch in the sump, and it worked flawlessly. It was fine. It worked. But eventually, I wanted to try something new, and the Smart ATO by Auto Aqua came out. And so I decided, let me hook that up instead, which it was cleaner. It held on to the sump magnetically, and it included its pump. It included the pump, the tubing. Everything was in the box. You didn't have to go to Home Depot for anything. And I thought, how awesome is this? And it took 5 minutes to install. I removed all my weird DIY stuff and hooked it up, and it worked perfectly. I mean, it was great. And then after a couple of years, I wanted to try something else. So I tried the ice cap top off, and then after that I tried the ATK from Neptune, and which is what I still run to this day. I still have the original ATK, the version 1. I'm using the version 1 pump. The FMM module is still the version 1. It's just the original stuff. The only thing I've replaced on it probably a year ago were the optical sensors that finally failed and had to be replaced. But the sump itself and the top-off container was like a nice upgrade. I was able to do the plumbing differently. So that changed on the reef as well, because originally I had 4 drains pouring down into the skimmer section and 1 drain pouring into the refugium. And it was very noisy. It kind of felt like thunder. And I wanted to do something different. So this time I installed the plumbing going into the side of the sump, where it just comes straight down from the tank and went into the side and just flows straight in with no air bubbles. And I did that by using a couple of gate valves. And that transition, or that change, has made my reef dead silent. It's actually incredible. I was telling you guys about the tank overflowing the other day, and I feel like I mentioned to you the week before that about the, maybe I didn't, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Well, anyway, I had to fix that plumbing for that anemone cube a couple of months ago. And when I did it, I had to turn off that Vectra pump that feeds the manifold in the anemone cube for a few hours to let the glue cure before I would resume flowing water through it. And when it was off, my tank was so quiet because there was no water going to the anemone cube, and there was no water going to the turf scrubber, and of course none going to reactors or anything. It was just the Abyss pump was pushing water up to the tank, and the tank was draining, and it was dead silent. You heard nothing. I kept looking at the tank saying, what's not turned on? What's wrong? And you didn't hear anything. Nothing. And I was like, man. And I kept looking at the vortex. Are they running? I looked at the return pump. Is it running? I looked at the skimmer. Is it on? And everything was on, but it was dead silent. So the noise that I have in my room, which is not offensive, but I hear it, is the drain from the anemone cube as well as the turf scrubber. And I really think the turf scrubber is the bigger offender of the two because of the way it drains into my sump. I didn't come up with a really cool way to kind of move it out quietly. And I still may have to do something about that just because, we like to obsess over the most minute of details when everything's working fine. But yeah, so that change in the plumbing, and also the new tank only had 4 drains instead of 5. So this time I have one drain that is full siphon that goes to the skimmer section, one drain that is actually full siphon that goes to the refugium, and then I have one drain that just pours down, but it's an emergency drain that I'm utilizing for either the Clara C or for a filter sock. And then the 4th drain is the true emergency drain that never sees a drop of water. And the idea is that if water were to start going out that drain, it would make enough noise that I need to look and see what's wrong. But that whole setup, like I said, it's dead silent. I'm very pleased with that plumbing. And it was a very nice upgrade about 3 years ago. So that was another big change. Then what else has... Okay, when I set up the 400 gallon, on the end of it, on top of my power center, which was a crazy spot to put this, but it made sense to me and I liked it, I had a little tiny frag tank that held 10 gallons of water, and I had some frags in there that I could easily feed, and I could put sun corals in there, I could feed them. And the concern everyone always had was, what if that tank ever overflows? And I just said, it hasn't, it won't, it's fine. And it never did. It never overflowed, it was never a problem. But it kind of was in a spot that was kind of insane. And I had it sitting on top of a thick wooden cutting board type slab of lumber. And if the water were to overflow, the idea was it would hit the wood and roll off the outside edges. And it never did that. The 400 gallon that sprung a leak after 13 months was peeing on the electrical power center when the power center is away from the tank, and yet it shot right at it. And here I am at 1 in the morning. I'm like, what is happening? What is that sound? And I grabbed a piece of pink foam and put it up to divert the water away from the electrical before it got all ruined. And yet the frag tank did no wrong. It was actually a nice little tank. It was easy to see. You could stand and just look down in it, and I could tinker around. I could feed stuff. It was nice. But eventually I got rid of that and made a new frag system that I never am happy with. That's a separate standalone tank in the fish room. So that was added. Still running the same calcium reactor. The lighting over the refugium changed as well. I had this huge light that was made by Unique LED Lighting, a company out of Dallas. It was very heavy. Had a monster heatsink in it. It was 48 inches long, and it must have weighed, I don't know, 20 pounds, 25 pounds. It was really heavy. And we had steel cable going up to hold it in place. And the guy that came over to help me install it, he actually helped me make it where I could adjust the height by moving the cables to a different hole in this track. And it was a very nice pulley system that I had for a very long time. And then the XHOs were doing so well over my tank, I'm jumping ahead, that I went ahead and got a refugium light by the XHO brand, or by Reef Bright, that is their grow light. And it's probably a combination of 6500 and 5100 Kelvin. It's kind of a white-yellow light, and it grows my macroalgae beautifully, and it runs 9 hours a day. And so I got rid of that huge, heavy light for this much cleaner, thinner, tinier, updated LED fixture that I'm very happy with. And it's also on a pulley system, but instead of using steel cable, I'm using fishing line with a little S hook on the end, where I can just pull the threads, hook it on a new hole, and lift it up so I can work on the refugium, and then I can let it back down. So that was changed. On top of the tank, I was running metal halides in the Lumen Bright reflectors, and I did that for all the way through, 5 weeks ago. And adjacent to those bulbs, I was also running VHOs. So in that one picture I showed you before, I'll put it back on the screen here. At the top, you see those bright white things. Those are superactinic URI VHO bulbs. Those are T12s. I never did the T5s. I tried T5s out briefly when they first came out, and they ran super hot. You needed a lot of them. They were not cheap, and I was just happy with VHOs. And I ran VHOs for a very long time. When Reef Bright came out with their XHOs, I was curious. I went to visit Tammy and I saw hers over her tank, and she had the ones that were a 50-50 of blue and white. And I said, well, I really want just blues. I want to have only blue. I don't know what that's going to look like. So she let me borrow one of her lights. And what she had was she had two that she let me borrow. One was a 50-50, which was pointless. And then the other was not XHO. It was probably like HO. I don't remember what Tulio called those, but they didn't have any kind of pump or any kind of push. And so I would hold it over the tank with my hand, turned on, and just kind of like do this to kind of see if I could see the blue moving through the reef. And I saw nothing. And I was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. And I talked with him, and he says, no, Mark, you're going to love the XHOs. I'm going to send them out to you, and you'll be very happy. And so I got this huge box. It's by my front door forever. And I did not install them. They sat by the front door for probably about a solid 6 months. And I remember he'd say, hey, Mark, have you installed those yet? I was like, no, I haven't. It's a whole process, because not only do I have to install it, I have to film it. And when you got to film it, everything takes 5 times as long to do. So I haven't done it. I'll do it. And he's like, all right, no pressure, just whenever you have time. I really want to know your reaction. I want to know how you feel. I'm sure you're going to love them, but I want you to tell me what you think. I said, okay. Well, the guilt trip didn't work. They sat in the box forever. And then finally, I think one day he's like, Mark, just do it. And I'm like, but I love my VHOs. And he just said, these are better. And I had my doubts. I was like, I just don't know. And then I was traveling, and I'd come across more VHO bulbs in fish stores, like in Seattle, or I'm in North Carolina or something. I'm like, how do I bring that home on an airplane? Because I need these, and I can't get them locally. So I was realizing they were getting harder and harder to come by. Maybe I should open this package. And so my friend AJ came over, and we made that video that's on this channel where it showed me installing the XHOs, and we did a huge time-lapse thing, and it was a lot of fun. And wow, were they good? I was so wrong. Why did I wait 6 months to install them? No, they were phenomenal. They were gorgeous, and I still have them on the tank now because I still love them. But I've been running them for, I think, 5 years now. So I went from VHOs to LED supplementation. The XHOs are no joke. They have like the perfect cool glowing blue spectrum that you want. And they are on my system set to on off, but I think it's okay to say this. I believe either you can dim them now or you will be able to dim them at some point in the future. I think that's an option. So that way you can have that ramp up, ramp down thing if you like that and you want it. For a guy that started reef keeping where you had a light turn on and then turn off, to have anything ramping up and down is like a bonus. It's I mean, when you walk into a room, do you ramp your lights on and off, or you just turn on the light and walk into the bathroom or the kitchen? We're used to just flipping things on and off, and for the lights to come on, it was the normal thing, and the fish didn't have a problem with it. They were used to it, but having it dim and then build up is nice. So I really enjoy the XHOs, and that was a big change. They replaced the VHOs. The VHOs had these end sockets that were waterproof, and it took quite a bit to actually disassemble and remove everything to install the nice, clean XHO power strip. And there's 2 over my tank. I think, and then in 2017, 2018, somewhere in then, whenever the Trident came out, I finally upgraded my Apex Classic to the newer version, or the current model of the Apex, which is called Apex Wi-Fi. And that one came out in 2016. It took me a couple of years to get on board because my Apex Classic was doing what I needed, but it would not work with a Trident. So I went ahead and I got the newer Apex, hooked it up, and it had all kinds of neat features that I couldn't do before, such as power monitoring, to where you could actually see how much power each item was using. I could plug in things that I couldn't plug in before. But the basics. The programming was the same. The probes were the same. I could still use my energy bars. I didn't have to buy like all new energy bars. I could use the EB4 and the EB8, and I still have quite a few of those tied into my system, as well as a couple of the EB832s. I added the Trident, and I ran that for, I don't know, a good year and a half or so. I had a problem with mine, and I just ignored it. And this is kind of a weird one, because you know how much I care about my reef. And I look at it all the time. And this isn't going to sell you on it, but it's just me. It's how I feel. When you can constantly see the number on your phone at any given moment, it almost gives you more anxiety versus you're looking at your tank and it seems like everything's fine and you're not stressing about the magnesium is exactly right. The calcium is trending up. The alkalinity has dropped. What is happening? But at the same time, for the true control freaks out there, they like the ability to have a notification say, hey, alkalinity is below the right standard and you need to look into it. I mean, that makes sense. And I do like that part, but it messed up. I had to do an RMA and I just never got around to even put it in the box. I finally shipped it back. And so I'll be getting that back at some point, I don't know, the next week or two, and I'll hook it up again. But it's been kind of nice to have ignorance as is bliss. But when you're testing your water weekly, you still are getting some numbers. But seeing the numbers all the time, I think it stresses people out more than they need to be. Now, if you can just kind of like look at it and just be aware and not be stressed, fantastic. That's how it should be. We're supposed to enjoy the hobby and not be just constantly on edge that something's wrong or about to happen. And it is nice to have all kinds of good programming to warn you about when things are going wrong. So I'm not trying to dissuade anyone. I was just saying how I felt when it kind of messed up. I was like, okay. That works for me at this time. So it's getting taken care of, and I'll get that reinstalled, and hopefully I'll get back to business, and it'll be no big deal at all. Salt mixes. So I saw someone mention that. Did I change salts during that time? I started off with Saibon, which was a Chinese salt. They were bringing it to the US through Premium Aquatics, and I ordered a pallet of it so I could have tons of salt. And I set up the tank with it, and I did all my water changes with it, and the reef did great. I mean, there was a lot of growth, and the only problem I had with that brand of salt was the magnesium was always 1600, and I could never get it to come down because every bag was 1600, and I started the tank with 1600, so nothing could consume it enough to pull it down. And so for all those years that I ran Saibon, my tank was always 1600, and all was well. But eventually, I think Saibon became harder to come by, or maybe I thought I'll try something new, and so I switched to Aquavitro Salinity. I tried some other ones in the middle of that 10-year period, but Aquavitro is what I've been using for probably the last 5 or 6 years, and I buy a huge barrel that makes 1,026 gallons of salt water, and a barrel, because I don't do a lot of water changes, a barrel will last me a super long time. But it's the brand of salt I've been using. I've tried Fritz a couple of times, didn't have anything bad happen, just it was harder to get that salt into the vat than using the big barrel and using a very small bucket, which you saw in one of my videos not too long ago where I showed me going up and down the ladder a dozen times. So I really liked Saibon in that regard because I could take the bag up, just cut it, and it was something crazy, like 6 bags was exactly right. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to have like 6 bags, 2 cups, and a teaspoon. It was just 6 bags. I'm like, man, I love this brand. But yeah, when I no longer had it, that was the end of that, and I had to go ahead and embrace something different. So I did that. I think, I'm trying to remember, during the 10 years, I probably started off with Salifert test kits back then, and I won some Elos test kits through a contest on Facebook, and I liked them so much I switched to Elos, and I've never gone back. I really like those for my testing. I was used to shaking the vial by hand until someone came out with a little 3D printed gizmo that could stir your test vial, and I was like, this is fantastic. And I've been using a magnetic stirrer ever since. I used the one from Auto Aqua, I think it is, the Smart Spin. That thing came out maybe 6-8 months ago, is that right? And I love it. It's awesome. I plug it into the USB port to charge it once, and I think in all the times I used it before I flooded it with that giant tank overflowing that I talked about last weekend and destroyed it, I probably only charged it twice out of all the use I used it. The battery was forever. It was fantastic. It's a wonderful thing. So I had to open a brand new one. and I used it last night. It was great. Very happy with that. Love the magnetic stirrer. I don't know why more of you don't have that thing. I do sell it on my website. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. It ships for $6. I think it's 30 bucks, 35, something like that. And it's sweet. If you all you need is one Red Sea test kit beaker to fit into it. You can put an Elos test kit vial in there, or you could put an API vial in there if you're really can center it perfectly and don't worry about falling over. But the Red Sea vial fits in beautifully. You can probably find that on eBay or Amazon or something. You get yourself one or two of those. And then never lose the little pill. It looks like a grain of rice. It's the thing that stirs. I've to this day not lost the original one. I've always had it, but it is possible to lose it. I found it once in my garbage disposal. It wasn't completely lost. It got away from me, but I found it. So I highly recommend that device. And like, if you guys hate water testing, get that thing and you'll start liking to test your water. You'll enjoy it. I think that is all the changes that were done on the 400 gallon during the last 10 years. I can't think of anything else that changed. I was still using phosphate RX to remove phosphate. I never ran GFO because I find it to be pointless for me. I may have added a waste collector during the 10-year period. I probably didn't start off the reef with a waste collector on my protein skimmer. And so like after a couple of years or so, I was at a frag swap and this club member had what looked brand new to me, this acrylic thing that was designed to be a waste collector. They used a ping pong ball. And I was like, how much is that? And he told me $25. And I was like, oh my God, there's more acrylic in that than $25. I'll take it. And I brought it home and I modified it slightly to work for what I needed to work with my Euroreef. And then when I pulled the Euroreef out, I made the Nios work with it. And the way it works is when the skimmer bubbles over and the skimmate collects in the cup, it quietly drains into the waste collector. And when the waste collector fills to the top, it sends a notification through the Apex to my phone to say, hey, the protein skimmer is overflowing. And it turns off one of the pumps on the protein skimmer so the skimmer can't overflow anymore. And the waste collector sits there full of liquid, and I get a notification every single hour until I drain it. And I set that up, I don't know, I don't remember when I did it, but let's just pretend it was 7 years ago, and I wish I'd done it much sooner. It's a wonderful option. There is another product by Auto Aqua. I talk about them a lot because I made a lot of neat little gizmos. They have another one that's a sensor that holds on magnetically to the cup, and you put it near the top of the cup, and then you plug the skimmer into the receptacle, and when that sensor is wet, it will then kill the power to the skimmer. So if you don't have room for a waste collector near your sump, at the very least, you could have it when the cup is filled with water to the top, it just turns the skimmer off. But it won't notify you. Maybe it beeps, I don't know. But it's not gonna like send you a text. That's not an option like with me with the Apex, which is so nice. So if you would like that the beauty of not having a skimmer continually overflow is you don't get that spatter all over your sump and all over the base or the underside of your stand, and everything stays cleaner longer. So that's why I love the waste collector. And I never have to like wipe down my sump of spatter, which was an ongoing thing. Weather would change, I'd use ChemiClean or something like that in my tank, and the protein skimmer does this volcano effect, and I'd have to get it down there and wipe everything down and make sure everything looked right again. And that was eliminated from my life. That was fantastic. And then I'd say a year ago or so, I added the Algae turf scrubber. That was a new product that it's been on the market for a while. It actually existed for a super long time ago in like Australia. And people in Australia were talking about these Algae turf scrubbers. And we're in America like, what are they doing? They're running water down a screen with lights? Huh? Why don't you just have a refugium like a normal person? And apparently it was something someone came up with. At least I think this is the story. Someone came up with it in Australia and put a patent on it. And then eventually the patent ran out, and that's when you start seeing turf scrubbers all over the US. People were making them left and right and selling them, and it was like this whole new thing that wasn't new at all. It had existed, it just wasn't available here at the time. So the turf scrubbers were out and about. They seemed small, too small for my tank. And I was talking with Jason, and I saw a couple of them on display, or not display, they were in use when I went to speak in Minnesota. And we were at this, it was like I think it was a college campus. and the presenter was a teacher there, and he dealt with marine biology, and he had all these tanks and he had all this gear and they were growing all kinds of stuff, and he had the turf scrubber, and he pulled out that drawer and it was just filled with algae. Like, wow, that's cool. And he says, and I can just take this thing, and he was, dripping water on the floor, but he didn't care. It was concrete. It wasn't in his home. But I was just like, this is really impressive because it's a big box. The light is contained. You're not getting blinded. You have this drawer that fits in, and when you push it in, it's dead silent. When you pull it out, you can hear the water trickling, so you don't hear it. I thought, man, I think I want this thing. And I kept talking about it on this channel. And Jason was like, he sent one as a gift. He's like, here, try it on your tank. So I've been running it for a year, and I still can't make up my mind how I feel about it. I mean, I love that it's quiet. And I run the lights on it for about 10 hours a day. I think it runs from like 2:30 in the morning to about 12:30, noon. And the rest of the time it's off. And the reason is because my stand is wide open. There's no woodwork yet. And because of that, you can hear the fans blowing. So I like to have them blowing while I'm asleep. And that's the same as my dehumidifier. I run that during the night while I'm asleep, rather than having it just making all this noise next to me, pulling water out of the air nonstop all day long. So he's got his set up in his own tank inside a cabinet. He never hears it. Mine's open, and it's to the living room where I watch movies and stuff, so I can hear it. And so I run the fans late at night. I run the lights late at night. The drain coming out the bottom, he had recommended putting a filter sock under there in case any algae were to escape. It traps there and doesn't get loose in your sump. And so when I built my stand for the turf scrubber, I made it that way, and I put it right over my bubble trap, which seemed logical at the time. But however, that is the one part that I'm saying is a little noisy. The water is coming down on top of the bubble trap, and I can't bring the pipe all the way down to the water because I have to get the sock in there. So I don't have a complete solution for what I want to do. I keep trying different ideas. My latest idea is to take the mesh material from a mesh filter sock and somehow like cut off the end of the sock so it's open, and put it, take the drawer out, and where the drain is, put the mesh through it so it comes down, and like here's the PVC pipe, and then the mesh will just hang down like a skirt out of the pipe, and so the water will flow down the mesh. That may make it quiet, and so that's what I'm going to try out and see if that helps, because it'd be nice, because like I said, I think that is my noisiest offender out of my very quiet reef tank. I just want it quieter. But I can't grow the algae he grows, and that's what irritates me. I grow all kinds of weird stuff, but I'm not growing like tons of hair algae. The last few months I've been growing ulva and cyano on it, and I'm like, why? And he did give me one solution to try out a while back, which was to put screen in there that, the same kind of screen used for needlepoint, the same screen you use to grow the algae on there. He suggested putting a couple in front of the lights to dim the lights a little bit, and maybe I'd get the hair algae growth that he pulls off. It looks like he's making salad. It's impressive, and he posts the pictures on his Instagram all the time of the latest batch. And his tank looks great, and he doesn't have an algae problem in there, and the turf scrubber is doing its job, and he has no refugium. So my refugium has not slowed down or gotten weaker like we thought might happen with the turf scrubber, that they'd compete. I have an algae forest of feather caulerpa, and I've got the turf scrubber full of whatever stuff is that's growing. I can't just say it. Well, I can tell you this: it does not solve my nitrate and phosphate problems, probably because I feed too much. But I only feed once a day, and I got rid of I removed all of my auto feeders, so my numbers should in theory be coming down, but they don't. I spoil my babies with way too much good stuff. Food-wise, I use the same foods I've been using forever. That's never changed. I use Rod's food. I use mini PE Mysis, whatever brand that is. I'm sorry, I just don't know by heart. I use krill. I think it's called San Francisco krill or something like that. And some PE Mysis. And I break those all up into a bowl, mix it with salt water, let it thaw, and then I feed, 55, 60 fish a night. There's a lot of fish in the 3 tanks. And between all those fish, that's where my nitrate and phosphate come from. So that's, I think, everything that has to do with what's happened with the tank in the last 10 years. So I hope that didn't just bore you to tears, that you thought it was kind of interesting. Because when I saw the question on Facebook, I said, you know, that actually is a good question. What all did you change? Because a lot of people don't keep their tanks up long term. They upgrade and they upgrade and they upgrade. And as they upgrade, of course, they keep changing things to make it better. But me, I try to just keep going. And if I change a component out, it's for the betterment of the tank. But it's not it wasn't like because I was in the middle of something. It wasn't like the tank was crashing, so I had to do this. So that, oh, I didn't mention the most important one. I replaced my metal halides 5 weeks ago with LEDs. So I'm using the new sky lights that are from Neptune Systems. They integrate with the Apex, but if you don't have an Apex, you can run them without. You can use Bluetooth and use their app, which I haven't even seen. I've only seen it in videos. I was like, hey, I wish I could see that, but I don't run my Bluetooth. I have 3 lights over my tank. They are 200 watt LED lights, 200 watt ballasts, and their maximum strength, I'm running here, I'll put this camera back on for you guys so you can kind of see this. The maximum intensity of my daily schedule is 60% of what the sky can put out, and that is because I measured with a par meter to see what the par was with metal halides before I switched to make sure I matched the LEDs as closely as possible so I wouldn't burn my corals. And I do have a video that I shared on Instagram. There's no point trying to share it on here right now. But I shared it on my Instagram page, so you guys can go there. And the Shadowcaster is bursting out with lots of new tips. There's a lot of new growth happening, and that coral is being hit by light for the last 5 weeks from the skies. And I'm going to attribute that growth to the skies. I also have a different acro that I got from Dwayne a long time ago that's been boring and brown and ugly, and I kept saying I need to rip that out and throw it away. And it continues to look beautiful. Here's another, this is the video you're watching before, and this is actually under the skies as well. I had a clip on the front of my lens to take away the blue hue so you could see the details of the corals. But there, on the left side of the tank, there's a green coral, and that's the lime in the sky Acropora. And above it are these sticks standing up that just are nothing. They're just brown and they're boring and they're hideous. Well, there are little tiny tips about a ½ inch tall on top of all those brown sticks that are purple. So I'm thinking that coral is supposed to be purple, and it is starting to show this new growth. I'm like, so that's what you're supposed to look like all this time, because I've been regretting that I wasted space on these corals that just look like nothing in my aquarium up till now. So the sky change did a couple of things for the reef. Number one, the reef tank is a degree less than it was before with metal halides. So each day the temperature swing is roughly 1.1 degree from the bottom to the top. I'm using less power. I was using about 10 amps of power while the lights were on all day long, and during that photo period, and now I'm running about 3 amps of power during the photo period. So I'm definitely saving some electricity there. The heaters are not coming on as much as I expected. I thought they'd come on more to make up for the lack of heat from the metal halides, but so far that doesn't seem to be the case. So that's been an interesting change. And then I get to change the spectrum of the tank by just changing a couple of buttons on my phone with Apex Fusion. And I had someone swing by today who wanted to see the skies in person, and he wanted to see the different modes, and I showed him everything in a matter of a couple of minutes. Where with metal halides, you had to turn them off and then turn them back on and wait a few minutes for them to warm up and be the right color. And with the LEDs, you could make the switch instantly, which is very nice, and I really do enjoy that. So that is kind of, I think I've covered everything. I think I forgot nothing. So that's good news, right? I would like to now start handling some of your questions. And if you haven't already done it, please do add Miller's Reef in your comments so I can find them a little bit more easily. And so let me take a look at what you've been asking. I'm going to read some of your comments here, and I guess I'll throw that video back on the screen since it's more interesting than just looking at me watching the screen. One person asked me if I was going to go to Reefapalooza in Orlando. No, I'm not. I don't have plans to go to any trade shows yet this year. I haven't made any plans at all. I have been just trying to keep my head above water, staying local. But thank you for asking. Oh, thank you. Paul mentioned Caitlin's favorite fish is the lemon peel angelfish. That's true. I didn't put that on the list of favorite things she had. Ah, since we're... hang on. Let me find a question. I'm looking for a question. Sorry, guys. Let's see. Freshwater Coral says, for my next tank, I'm thinking about using sunlight, not solar tubes, just a large, lightly tinted skylight. Going to add some blue LED strips. Any tips or things to consider? Well, if you really want to do some kind of light, the solar tubes are actually a really good choice. But if you can't do that, I would recommend a clear skylight, just like Starfire glass up there, where you're getting the full spectrum straight through and you're not tinting it at all. And you'll want a par meter so you can actually measure the quality of the par inside your aquarium to see what you're getting. And that's going to change constantly as the weather changes constantly. In a cloudy day, a sunny day, a rainy day, a windy day, you'd be surprised how much it changes. I have a friend in California who made this giant skylight chimney, and the whole chimney that came down over the tank, it was the same size as the aquarium, and it was a huge aquarium, was all covered with like reflective metal, so it could like ricochet down off the mirrored surfaces to get down in the tank. And I'll tell you, he grew a lot of nuisance algae he was not happy with. That was a real problem. And when the days were cloudy or overcast, his tank was very dim. I know a friend in Florida who did the solar tubes and brought the light in through those tubes, but then he put metal halides between them because he found there were days where the tank just didn't get enough light, and so he could supplement with metal halides to add some additional light. So you may want to do a clear skylight, not a tinted one, and I'd recommend reflective surfaces going down to the tank myself, but if you don't want to do it, you can try without and see what happens. I guess worst case, you find a way to snake yourself up there and add some reflective material in there. And then probably own some supplemental light you can use. The whole idea of daylight is such a cool idea. I mean, the corals grow in the ocean under daylight, so yes, it should work. But there's also a ton of fish out there eating the algae nonstop all day long, taking care of it so that everything looks semi-good. So you've got that to consider. And then there was a guy in, I think he was in Italy, and he made this really cool tank in the middle of his yard. Outside, he dug a hole into the yard. He lowered the tank into the hole. He put foam underneath it so it was slightly insulated from the earth. And then the top of the tank, I mean, the whole tank was sealed. I wish I could find that thread, but man, that was so long ago. But just imagine a glass box that is 6 sides of glass. So you got the bottom, you got the 4 walls, and you got the top. And it was completely silicone together. And then on one edge, there was an opening the full length of the tank that was about 6 inches wide. And it was taller so that he could reach in to plant corals and arrange things and feed the fish and so forth. But the water in the box came up to the top piece of glass and filled that higher channel. So it was completely full of water, so there was no air bubble whatsoever. And so it was water to the glass. And he had this outside in full sunlight. He would cover it when there were storms to protect it from damage. He ran pipes through the ground to a shed nearby where he had a chiller, and he had some other filtration going on out there. And it was really quite a trick. And it was so neat because you could just he would sit around it in lawn chairs and they enjoy this lagoon style tank, but you didn't hear any water movement or anything. Maybe you heard something from the shed, but you were looking at the glass surface. Now I'm wondering when he was, because you couldn't put lights over it, so you wouldn't be able to enjoy it at night. You could only see it during the daytime. I'm wondering when you're sitting down if you would see the sky reflecting off the glass and kind of obscure your view, and if you had to stand more above it to look straight down, because the pictures were always at an angle where you could see into the tank. But it was pretty neat to do that. But he was using daylight, and it seemed to work for a while. I think he eventually moved, and so that tank wasn't a long-term tank. But I kept wondering, how do you keep the glass clean, especially that upper surface? That would have to be, I mean, I guess a cleaning magnet would work. Now I'm thinking about it, that's one way to do it. Oh, and by the way, speaking of cleaning magnets, I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of us have these big poly tanks and we want to figure out a way to clean them. And we do all this stuff. We get brushes and we use acid and all this stuff. And I was thinking, why don't I ever see anyone putting a cleaning magnet on their vat and then just scrubbing the walls to kind of like knock that stuff off the walls? And it's something I'm going to try and see. I'm probably going to find out why no one does it very soon. Probably what's going to happen is it's going to separate. But if you're using like a mag float, I think that would work because it would just float to the surface and you get them reconnected again and then resume cleaning. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't work on round, but it was just an idea that popped into my head a few days ago. Thomas says I had to treat my tank for cyano algae, and my protein skimmer now is overflowing, and I've been dumping it out. How long until it stops? You just keep dumping it out and dumping it out and dumping it out as much as you have to, as fast as you can, until it slows down. And all the water that you're dumping out, that you're throwing away, put more salt water in to replace what you're wasting. So if you were to take the cup off your skimmer and drop it into a bucket, and you kept doing that for the first hour, and you realize the bucket has 2 gallons of water in it now, put 2 gallons of salt water back in your reef, so that way you don't change the salinity of your tank. But if you'll do it and just stay on top of it for 4 to 6 hours, usually at that point the skimmer's pulled out everything it's going to pull out and it settles down and you're back to business, and you don't have to deal with it anymore. It'll just work. Let's see. Joshua says, how long have you had the purple Tang and how big is it? Well, I don't know how big it is, but I've had it since 2004. The purple Tang and Spock, the Nassau, both came with the 280-gallon tank that I bought used, and those fish have been with me ever since. Jeff says, what would you recommend, clowns or anemones first in the aquarium? Thank you. How many clowns recommended? One or a few? A lot of times people put the clownfish in first in the aquarium, and usually it's a pair. If you're doing skunk clownfish, you can get a harem because that needs to be 7 or 9 fish. Of course, it depends on the size of your aquarium. But for the most part, you should be okay with, I mean, if you're just doing like some designer clownfish, like you like bullet holes, or you like snowflake, or you like helmet head, or whatever nicknames they got out there, just get a pair. And I wouldn't try to put more than a pair in the tank because invariably 2 will dominate and the rest will be chased away or harassed or killed. So I would suggest that. And then you can add the anemone later, and hopefully those clowns will find the anemone and start to live in it like they're supposed to. That doesn't always work, but it usually does. It has in my case. Now, when I put the skunk clownfish in the 400-gallon years ago, I used an acrylic tube and did a video about it on this YouTube channel where I held the tube right over the anemone and I poured 1 clownfish down the tube at a time until all 11 were down in the anemone. And for the most part, they live in it. You know, they kind of spread out a little bit. You can see all those other little nano nems that are in there eating up space that I need to remove. And sometimes you'll see them in the Duncans or hanging out up there near the hammer. But the sea bay is their home. Plymouth says, what type of gorgonian is that, the big one? Believe it or not, it's called the Tracy Morgan gorgonian, and it was named that after Tracy Morgan visited the 20,000-gallon reef and loved that coral, and they decided to name it after him. And so there was a company named Reef Gen at that time that was selling frags of that. And that is one of the corals I was thinking about fragging to put in my little packages that go out with the anemone to people who wanted to order from me. Wow, Jamie, that was deep. I had to read it twice to understand what it said. Similar to the ship of Theseus paradox, how much can be changed before it's a different setup? Wow. All right. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We're hanging up now. Hope you enjoyed the show. Holy crap, that was deep. It's still the same setup. I don't care what you say. You know, someone asked me yesterday, well, have you ever considered a new tank or a dream setup? And I was like, this is the new tank dream setup. That was my dream tank in 2010. I was like, I want to set up a 400-gallon tank, 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, 30 inches tall, Starfire glass, and that's what I did. And here we are a decade later. It's still my dream tank. Let's see. Okay. Lucas says, I have an Octo 200 EXT recirculating protein skimmer. It needs to be fed by a dedicated feed pump for water flow to go along with the recirculating pump that makes the bubbles. See, there's a part B to that. We have to get to the question part. The feed rate from the Octo is 600 to 1,000 gallons per hour. I picked up a Varios 5-4 pump, which is a max flow rate of 1,050, but even on the lowest setting, it's way too much feed flow rate. Any suggestions? If that pump is too fast, you could put a gate valve on the line going to the protein skimmer to reduce the water going in. The other thing is maybe, just maybe, your Octo skimmer is standing in too much water. It needs to be raised up a couple of inches, and then it'll all equalize out perfectly. So maybe the simplest solution first would be lift the skimmer up on a stand and try again and see what it does. And dial down that external feed pump and see if it'll cooperate. And if that doesn't work, you may have to put a gate valve on the outbound line from the pump going to the skimmer to twist and block how much water gets out. So you have the external pump running at its lowest setting, and you have the valve to valve it down. Or you get a smaller pump that seems to cooperate better. I would think these guys would tell you exactly what works with their skimmer, and they would say use this. And if they told you this one, it sounds like it's a configuration problem that, like, I feel like the protein skimmer is standing in too much water, and that's why it's doing this. They really don't like to stand in a lot of water. I've had Octo skimmers in the past, and they had to be in like 4 inches of water. It was not much. And most sumps are like 9 inches, 11 inches, 13 inches deep of water, and the protein skimmer has to be lifted up 6 inches to get it to even operate correctly. So maybe that is what's going on for you, possibly. Now you said it's an external, wait, hang on. You said it's a 200 EXT. That means it's an external skimmer. And if it's external, it's not sitting in water at all. So everything I just said is not true. I take it all back. Rewind. I would try the gate valve then on your feed pump and just crank it down and see if you can find that sweet spot. Also, since it's external, perhaps the water line coming out of the protein skimmer and going down into the sump isn't going straight and down, but it's like going up and over and down. And if you're doing that, you're causing a restriction to where the water is flowing. So you want to make sure that that drain coming out of the protein skimmer is going downhill and into the sump perfectly. So I would look at that. All right, so that's my best guess without seeing pictures of what's going on. Looking for another question. Thank you very much for the super chat, Malcolm. I appreciate that. Oh, and Andrea put a link for the Smart Stir. Thank you. You're so helpful. That was awesome. We have 169 people on here right now. That's a lot. And Rob, thank you very much for your super chat. He says, just thank you for everything. You're welcome for everything. Okay, so I was talking to Than from Tidal Garden yesterday, and we were talking about Caitlin, and he said, you're actually going to do a live stream tomorrow during her birthday. And he said, I don't know how you're doing this. And it actually helps to talk to people rather than just be alone with your thoughts. I do have the TV on all the time to distract me. I am trying to get my feet back under me. I'm not shell shocked. I don't really have the right words for how I am. I'm not great. Okay, that's the truth. And I think a lot of you know that. but I am trying to move forward and deal with the feelings that are overwhelming me at the same time, which is no small feat. It's really hard. I think this was the hardest thing I've gone through in my entire life out of everything I've been through, and I've been through a lot, but this one here, man, it hit hard. And thank you very much for the super chat, Red Dawn. I appreciate that. Let me find the next question. Marcus is suggesting for my turf scrubber to use something called a nut milk bag. He says, but it would clog up. See, what I was thinking of was if I were to take the mesh of I have an actual mesh sock. You know, it's got the plastic ring and it's mesh material. And if I were to cut off the bottom so it's open, but and the problem is it's 4 inches and my pipe is maybe 1.25 inches internally. But if I could take the fabric and somehow line it in the pipe and come straight down and hang like a curtain, I think the water will just flow down the fabric. You know, come down the pipe and flow down the fabric and just quietly go in. I just need to try it. I just need to destroy a mesh sock and see what happens. Fortunately, they don't cost a lot, so I can just see what it does. But it would be nice to, because I still have a sock around that to catch the big bits that do fall out the bottom, which does happen. And it's worked out really well. My sump isn't filled with all kinds of stuff I have to remove, which I really do like. Let's see. Okay, digging with Cruzy says, I have a question. I have a dual reactor and my phosphate is 0. If I turn off my reactor, will the GFO go bad or get hard? If your phosphate is 0, congratulations, that's good, but we don't want it to be 0. We want it to be up a little bit higher. Will it go bad or turn hard? Yes. What will happen is that the water not flowing through the reactor, that water will go anoxic. It becomes oxygen deprived. It actually smells like sulfur after a little while, and it will. And then if you were to open the valve again, it would pump all that poison into your tank. We don't want to do that. So if your phosphates are that low, I would remove the reactor offline, and I would just take it off and maybe rinse it out and get it ready for next time you need to run it again. You also probably should use less GFO in the future. You're gonna have to find this. You're gonna have to do some math, okay? Some real math. And you remember how in school there were, anyway, you're gonna have to use some math, and you're gonna want to find out exactly how much you need and exactly what flow rate is ideal to maintain a little bit of phosphate in the water and not let it elevate high. And if you can do that, your tank will do really well and you'll never have to turn it off. Now, the reason it turns hard or solid is because of it's something that happens with alkalinity. And there has to be enough circulation through the GFO to keep it moving slightly. And Two Little Fishies, Julian Sprung from Two Little Fishies many years ago said to avoid it turning into a hard rock is to actually open the valve and do a puff of water through it once a week, just to kind of and then bring it back down to its normal moonquake look. I've always called it that. When it's just barely moving, that's moonquake to me, like an earthquake, but a moonquake, because it's kind of slow-mo. And if you do that and you use the right amount, you'll keep your phosphates down where they belong. Now, phosphates in your tank should be like 0.03, 0.07, maybe as much as 0.1. We know that 0 is bad. We've learned that the hard way, because people that have 0 phosphate, 0 nitrate are all dealing with dinoflagellates and all kinds of issues. So we are all actively trying to have a little bit of phosphate in the water. So as long as your tank has a little bit, but the water coming out of your reactor is measuring 0 phosphate, so you actually measure the output. If it's coming out 0, it's working. If it's coming out the same or higher than what is in your tank, then the GFO is no longer good and has to be replaced. But unfortunately, no, you can't just turn it off and then turn it on later when you want to use it again. That's not an option. And Marcus, I don't know if you're talking to me or not, but a sulfur reactor would work 10 times better. And could I be sold on that? Yeah, I think I could. I'm kind of really on the, I'm really leaning toward, let me just do that. Let me just do that and move on with my life. Because I want to be able to just feed my fish and enjoy my corals and not be knowing there's nitrate trying to kill my tank. It's been an ongoing battle for way too long. Robbie says, you lost your shimmer. He's referring to the metal halides. There is a shimmer in the tank. It's subtle. It's not like a pool shimmer. I can see it on very specific places when I look in the tank. I can see it. There's this, in the middle of my reef, there's this red Monty way up high, and I can see the ripples going across it. There's a yellow scroll coral on the left of the tank that I see the ripples going across that. And then when I look at the wall where the overflow box is, that's all covered in coralline, I can see the ripples on that. But it's definitely not stagnant T5 look, that's for sure. But yeah, it's less than it was with the metal halides. I agree. Rob says, do you have any tips on preparing your tank for a vacation? Yeah, actually I do. And I'm sure I've done entire live streams on that topic alone. But some of the things I would recommend is do all your maintenance, make sure everything is operational, working properly, prepare all your foods for the daily feedings in small containers with date, with name, like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And if they're frozen foods and you're gonna have someone else put that in your tank, put them all in the freezer so they know each day to use one. And that way you limit how much they put in the tank so they don't just like take a jar of flake food and just shake it in, or pellet food or something like that. If you are not having someone watch your tank, you are going to need an auto feeder of some kind that will feed your tank, and you definitely want to install it now and observe it operating for a couple of weeks before you leave town. I don't recommend doing any big changes, like don't install a brand new controller on your tank. If you want to install a brand new webcam to look at the tank, yes, you can totally do that. But we want to avoid any big changes with the tank right before we leave town. Like I wouldn't do a giant water change the night before. I just wouldn't do it. I'd rather do the water change when I get back. And you need to make sure there's plenty of top off. You need to make sure that the temperature of the house is going to stay the same. A lot of people have those Nest controllers that measure activity. And when there's not as many people, or when there's no movement in the house, it adjusts the thermostat in the house to warm it up a little bit to save you money. And so now your tank gets too hot because the house is too hot. So you want to make sure that your tank temperature will stay stable the whole time, day or night, no matter what. That you have plenty of water to top off the aquarium to make up for evaporation. And if you are on vacation and you're going to be gone for so many days and your top off container doesn't hold enough water, you can totally put a trash can of water in front of the aquarium because no one's there, and you could have it top off directly into the tank instead of the sump. That way it can't, when you've got water in the sump at this height and you got water in the top of the container at this height, you don't want, when the thing turns off, to just keep siphoning until the two waters match. So if you had a trash can full of water and you have the small sump, you don't want all that trash can water to go in and overflow the sump. So we want to make sure there's a siphon break, just like we do with any kind of top-off system. So those are some of the things that I would recommend. I highly urge you to have a tank sitter. It'd be great if you can have them come over once or twice before you leave town to kind of go over things and discuss and tell them what to do, including, this is how you text me. This is how you call me because everything is going wrong. Don't just assume it's fine. And you're going to be super crystal clear on things too. For example, Caitlin had a really nice tank and she was living with a boyfriend. And while she was traveling, she said to him, make sure you turn the light on and off each day for the fish. And she had these beautiful maroon lightning clownfish and a beautiful rose anemone, I believe. And he did not know what she meant by the light, and so he turned the light on in the room, and the anemone died. And when it died, it took out the whole tank as it was a nano tank, and it killed these very expensive tank-raised fish, and it killed everything. And she was so mad. As a matter of fact, when she came home, he actually got rid of all the evidence. He got rid of the tank and everything because he just said, well, it smelled bad. And she lost everything because he did not think, when she said turn on the lights or turn off the lights, she was talking about tank lights. So be very crystal clear about what you're saying, so that way your stuff will be okay. And I'll tell you, it's so easy to say something seems so obvious to you. And what was another one? I told someone to put an air stone in their water to oxygenate it, to raise the pH of the water before they used it. And that person literally took the air stone, a wooden one, and just threw it in the barrel and said, I don't see how that's doing anything. Because I didn't actually say an air stone with tubing to an air pump that's plugged in the wall to push air into the water. So you have to, and I know that sounds really silly, but that's what they heard. Put an air stone in there. So she did. And that was the end of that. And I was like, okay, Maybe I should have been a little more clear. So that's why I go to so much detail in my answers, because it's so easy to just say 1 or 2 word answers that don't help anyone, when we could instead really explain what we mean and go into further detail. Regis says, how would you recommend or suggest to deal with vermitid snails? The vermitids that grow out of your rock work, I don't know how many you have. I don't know if you have hundreds or not. There's been a few solutions now for several years. One of the simplest ones is to break off the tubes with your finger or a tool and then put a drop of super glue gel over the hole so it just dies inside its home, and that's the end of it. You can break off the tubes and then hope something like a peppermint shrimp will go over there and get them, because now they can reach in and get them. Or it could be bumblebee snails could possibly eat them. A copperband might eat them. Blue-legged hermit crabs might eat them. But usually it's a matter of snapping off the tubes or actually removing the entire home. So I watched a friend of mine, Richard Ross. He took a dental tool and he reached into his reef tank and he definitely broke off the tube, but then he went deeper into the thing and kind of kept doing his thing and broke off the entire home off the rockwork and removed all of it, worm included. But you don't always have that opportunity. Sometimes the home is deep in the rock and you cannot get it out of the rock. So to seal the hole is usually your best bet. Aw. Thank you, Reef Trace. He says, thank you for these 10 years. Look forward to all the amazing stuff we do together the next 100. We love you, 3000. Rob says, do you have any conches in your reef right now? I don't. I haven't had any sand conchs in a while. I have some empty shells in my reef, but I would like to get some. Again, with a high nitrate, it's really hard to add new inverts to the tank because they don't tolerate it. My stuff is used to it. I've got to get the nitrates down. I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys last week, but my water mixing station, something happened to the mixing pump and I have to take it apart and figure out why it doesn't move water. And without that, I can't make salt water to do a water change. I have a whole vat full of water and it's just sitting there mocking me. So I need to take care of that here in the next, in this next week. Rob was asking if I'm selling my anemone. I am selling these little anemones. This is what they look like. And what I'm planning to do is bag up one of these in a small bag of water with another frag for my tank and just do a one price for the box where shipping is included, rather than trying to break it down, because shipping is expensive, and getting you guys some of my corals I thought would be a really cool thing to do. A lot of people love the anemone cube and would love an anemone from that tank. They've told me that so many times. Now, of course, they want the rows, but I'm selling the little nano nems, which are great for people with small tanks. And even if you have a big tank, you can have one in there or a few, and you can have something really nice. They're really, really pretty to look at. You just saw that one picture I just shared, and that was taken from above. I don't even think I put a thing on my lens. I think I just shot straight at it with my phone. So I've got so many of those little anemones. I probably have 100 that I could get rid of. And I was thinking about just shipping them all to Tidal Gardens, let him sell them. But then I thought maybe I'll just do my own thing here from this channel and see how it goes. So it was an offer. So I was telling everyone that if you wanted to buy one, to send me an email. And I put a thing up earlier. I don't know where it went. I had some text on the screen. Oh, it's behind all these chats probably. I'm looking. It's very tiny font. It's gone. Oh, here it is. So if you send me an email to sales@milersreef.com, I can go ahead and reach out to you when I'm ready. But the plan is to get this done probably next week while the weather's still decent. So sales@milersreef.com is my main email at Miller's Reef. And it's a good way to get a hold of me, and I do my best to answer everyone as quickly as I can. AM asks, I have a water box Peninsula 7225. I'm cycling. I aquascaped it with dry rock. I plan on 8 weeks of no light. Good. Should I add more than 1 dose of bacteria? When should I do the first water change? Thank you. Let me see something. I want to see what happened with the words. Ah, good. It was there, but it's a little hard to read. I'll shove it on here one more time. So you don't need more than 1 type of bacteria. There are a few different ones on the market. There is Live Rock Enhance, which is a great way to seed brand new rock. There is Microbacter Clean. These are a couple of different ones that are on the market. They've got some other things out there that you can use. I know Prodibio has a starter kit. I mean, there's really a lot of choices, but I don't know I'd throw in a bunch. And there's certain ones that have to work in conjunction with livestock. So for example, Live Rock Enhance just puts bacteria into the rock work, which is great. If you were to use, I think it's called Fritz Turbo Start, according to them, you put that in the tank and you must add fish within 24 hours or what you put in the tank just dies because it's lacking a food source or a fuel source to keep it going. So you have to know what you're planning, but I wouldn't just throw in one bacteria after another and hope to get the right wild combination of bacteria in your tank. Obviously you can do more research on this, but that would be my initial, I'd pick one and stick with it, and I would put in what they recommend. Now with Live Rock Enhance, that one they tell you to put it in 3 times the first week and then every 2 weeks. And you could just do that and just build up this population. And then during that cycle that you're doing, you can add a little bit of flake food for the bacteria to consume on and to help increase the population of bacteria in your water. Eric says, do you like the actual look of the tank with the new lights compared to metal halides? Yes, actually I do. I like it a lot, and I keep staring at it. And this whole last week, I turned off my XHOs entirely just to only operate the skies, just to watch the look. I wanted to see how it looked from when it's 2% light to 13% light to 58% light, and then back down all the way down to just pure moonlight for whatever that is, another hour or so, and then it's pitch dark. And I've enjoyed the roller coaster ride of the change. And I've toggled the XHOs on and off just to kind of see what are they adding or not adding, and I can see the difference. I can see it when it happens. But that being said, I'm sure there will be people out there that can say, well, yeah, sure, you can add the XHOs, but if you just did this with the sky, you'd get that same look, and that's probably true. I don't meddle with the programming much when I get a light set up. Initially that day, I put in some settings with Terrence's help, which you guys saw in the video, and got that programmed in, and I've pretty much left all those spectrums alone. And then after 2 weeks, I increased all the data points 10% higher. So initially my tank was at 51% of what the sky could do, and now it's at 60% of what the skies can do. I don't have this fervent desire to get to like 75% or 80%. That's not my plan. I just was trying to make the tank look the right brightness to my eyeballs without cooking the corals and killing them all because they're so used to the light they've had for so long. But I'm very impressed with the new growth I'm seeing. And I mean, literally, I was looking at the tank and I was like, wow, there's a bunch of little tips there. And there's a bunch of little ones here. And there's a bunch over here, all in the same acro. You know, just little bursting growth. I was like, that's new growth. I've had these lights for 5 weeks. That has to correlate together. The lights grew the tips. So that's good. And then, like I said, that other brown acro that's so hideous, I just want to rip it out. It has all these beautiful purple tips coming out. I'm like, oh. So something that's going to happen here in the near future, in about 3 more weeks or so, Dwayne is coming to town. And we're going to work on the tank and kind of depopulate it because it's too full. And when we do that, it will look different for the 8-year anniversary video. I'll show you guys one more picture I didn't put up on the screen yet. This is of the 400-gallon yesterday from the end. And as you can see, the Gorgonian is too tall. I need to cut that down about 50% to get my view back. I am still randomly losing a hammer head polyp. I don't know why. It's very annoying. I wish I could nail it on something and say this is the cause, but I haven't found it. The 2 that were looking kind of torn up look beat up, which makes me immediately think the copper band is doing it. I don't know if maybe it's just because I throw the food in the end of the tank and the food lands on the hammers and then the fish go and chase the food, and so they're snapping into the hammers and damaging them to get at the mysis and stuff that's blowing around. I'm not sure what's happening, but I would like to stop the death of these hammers because it's getting out of hand. All right, let's find another question. I'll leave that on the screen for a couple minutes. Now that was with all the skies at 100%, and I was running, and I had a clip on my phone that had the orange filter from Polyp Labs that blocks out any blue, even though there really wasn't much, but it just kind of makes, I feel that white light photographs so much better. It may not sell corals, but you can actually see everything in the tank, and that's why I like these kinds of pictures, and I like looking at a reef under those circumstances to enjoy the coloration of everything, you know, to actually see the health of the corals. Now, I will tell you that the fish under the skies are vivid and they are the right colors, which I cannot say about every light on the market. There are different lights out there. I've seen quite a few different LEDs over the years. I've seen them at trade shows on display on lots of different tanks, and I would look at the fish in the tanks, and you know, the blue Tang would look purple, you know. And I'm not getting that with the skies, which is actually a really cool point to mention, not to neglect. You know, the oranges on the Anthias are just vivid, and the yellow Tang is yellow, and the purple Tang's tail is so vivid. I mean, it's awesome. So I'm very happy with these lights. All right, let's see. Malcolm says, I have a magnetic optical sensor for my skimmer cup, but I do not know how to set it up for my Apex. Any suggestions? Well, you'll need the FMM module that sensor plugs into. I don't think you can plug into anything else. I think it has to be that module. And then you will code that to be a liquid monitoring sensor, because it can be one of two things. And then it's going to be either it's closed or it's open. Open means it's not wet. Closed means that the water has hit the sensor. And when it does that, you're going to have a line of code in the protein skimmer that says when, you know, sensor high is closed, skimmer off, that kind of thing. I mean, that's the basics. And there are guys in the Neptune group, there's on Facebook, or there is the Neptune forum on their official website where these kind of questions are answered all day long, and it totally can work. The sensor being in the collection cup will get dirty. You'll have to wash it more frequently, but being magnetic, it's so simple to just remove, go clean it up, and then put it back on. You're having the ability to have the skimmer turn off before it overflows and becomes a volcano is wonderful. But you're going to need a module, first of all, that's for sure, and then you'll be able to set that up with a little bit of code. And there's so many people that can help. I mean, I can try to help you with my code, but I'm sure there's others out there that are even better at it than I am that can help you quickly and efficiently set it up. Odds are John Halsey has done a tutorial about this exact thing that's on Reef to Reef already that you can go check out. Rob says, have you thought about setting up your frag tank and add your own corals to the website? No, I should, maybe. What I'd really like to do is get that tank cleaned up, which it's a nightmare. It's an absolute disgusting thing. But you know what? I've kind of left it on autopilot. I'm just almost intentionally ignoring it now to let whatever's in there burn itself out. In other words, you have a nuisance algae grow, and it wants to keep growing and growing. And you keep fighting and you keep removing and it keeps coming back. And I have this stuff that's been growing on the glass. It's just gross. And it kind of reminds me of dinos, but not quite. But I figure if I can let it completely explode on the glass, then, or the acrylic, then it will burn itself out because it'll use up all of its fuel and then it will dissipate. And that's exactly what's happened. It was really bad for a couple of weeks and now it's far less. So like that's kind of what I was expecting. So I'm staying on top of cleaning the protein skimmer. But that tank, as I've been saying for 2 solid years, needs to be completely reset. And my simplest solution is to just build a brand new tank, put it on that stand, do everything better, and then actually grow frags. I've got the gear for it to do everything it needs to do. When I first set up that tank, the plan was it'll just be a second tank that's going to run, and it'll let me try out products from different vendors. If they say, hey, we want to try out this protein skimmer, I was like, yeah, I have a 60 gallon, let's put it on that. Or I want you to try this light, yeah, I've got a 60 gallon, let's put it on that. And that was the plan. But that tank just has never done well, and I think part of it is the rock and the substrate are evil, and I think that all needs to come out, be cleaned up, and just kind of reset. And the tank has got a really bad calcification problem that ruined the walls of the acrylic, and it's actually probably easier for me to build a tank than it is to polish out all the defects that have happened to where you can't look through it. It's like an orange peel surface that you just can never see through it clearly. It's really bad, and I just want to get that thing going. I want to replace the sump with a little bit better one. I don't want to dose that one. I want to run a calcium reactor on it. So I mean, you know, I want to make my life simpler and not harder. And then yes, one of my friends, Wes, has said to me many times, Mark, you should have one of every single frag in your tank, or a frag of every coral in your tank in there. So if something bad happens to your reef, you've got backups. So, and he says, and then if somebody walks by walks into your house and they want to buy something, like, yeah, here, you could sell a frag. And then you were saying, and you could sell it on your website. Yeah, I guess I could. So these are all things that are possibilities that just need to happen. I just have to make the time. And for now, all I've really wanted to do, and I mean this from my heart, all I've really wanted to do is just get caught up on the orders for my customers. The simplest of orders are going out almost immediately because they are simple. They are something sitting on the shelf, I can drop it in. The things that have to be built, it is taking a ton of willpower to force myself to glue anything. My focus is just so messed up since Caitlin's death. And I spent time on Thursday cutting out acrylic. On Friday, I glued some acrylic. These are things that are going to go out on Monday. I want to keep whittling down the people that have been waiting so patiently for me to get my butt back into gear. And I want to take care of them rather than let me build a new tank, let me sell frags. I just don't want to do that. But the anemones are a problem. There's too many. And if I don't do something with them, like get them into your tanks and sell them to you guys so you can enjoy them, my other choice is to basically scrape them off the walls of the tank and throw them away, which I don't want to do with animals. But there's too many. They're all over the glass. I can't even see the tank. I can't enjoy it. There's too many. And so I want to get it to where it's a rockwork of anemones. The walls are clean and you can enjoy the view, and get all those ones out of the main reef, because there must be 50 in the main reef as well. They all need to come out. So that way when Dwayne's here to help re-aquascape, they're not in the way, they're not stinging corals, they're not eating up valuable real estate. So I thought, well, maybe I can sell some to you guys. I've just from the way people speak to me and how much they like my tank and my setup, I feel like people would want them. So I'd rather than sell them to some of you guys, so you have a piece of my reef and your reef. And that seems like a really nice option rather than me sell them to another vendor who's just going to sell them as regular livestock. So I thought I'd kind of do that personally, and I thought that would be a good choice. So I'm leaving it up into your hands. If this is something interesting that you are interested, if you think you'd like to do, we can discuss. And then what would the other frag be for my tank? I don't know. I'm going to see what's in the coral graveyard, which is that area in the back of my reef. By the way, I talked about this picture last week, the coral graveyard, while my microphone is on mute for all those minutes. So I call the area in the back of my reef the coral graveyard because that's where all the corals go. Not go to die. They go to grow. But I call it the graveyard. I don't know. They aren't where they belong. It's just my nickname. It's dumb. It makes no sense. But it is a real area. And there's a ton of life down there, and it needs to move so I can clean the sand bed. So it could be frags from that stuff. It could be the gorgonian. It could be the huge cactus pavona that is in the middle of my reef that is growing toward the glass. I mean, it's too big, and there's a bunch of pieces on the sand bed. So it could be an anemone, one of those, an anemone of this, an anemone of that. But I feel like everyone will have an opportunity to get something cool. Maybe it'll be more like rather than saying, I want this, you're getting an anemone and you're getting a frag, and it'll be a nice surprise. So that might be more fun. It reminds me of the old days of Woot when you fought to buy the box of crap. Do you guys remember that? That was hilarious. There would be people staying up all night waiting for the Woot alarm to go off, and then you'd fight to place an order to get a box of crap, having no idea what would be in the box. And it could be something from their break room, or it could be, you know, something really nice, like a Blu-ray player would show up at your door and you got it for, I don't know, $5 or $25 or something. And others would say, oh, I got it, there was nothing good. And some people would get the monkey, and it was really fun. I remember getting caught up in that. Boy, that was a long time ago. All right. Lucas is saying, thank you, I'll definitely try a smaller feed pump. I mean, yeah, you could use any pump that you happen to own and just try and see what happens. He says, basically, even with the current feed pump, the water level inside the skimmer is way too high. Likely just overpowering it with too much feed flow. Yeah, it probably is. And the nice thing about the gate valve is you're putting on the outbound side of the pump. That doesn't hurt the pump. You can close that. We don't want to close the intake. You never want to starve a pump, but you can definitely close the valve on the outbound side. By the way, I'm looking forward to getting my new iPad Pro that I ordered. I think I get it in a month. It's like, I want it now. I want to see what streams look like on that. I'm reading some of your comments, and people are talking about what they see on their phone versus iPad. I haven't had an iPad in so long that I really want to see what life is like with one. Oh, good. Yeah, Rob says, I was totally planning on doing a big water change right before I left. I'll scratch that from the list. Well, think about this. You're doing a big water change because the tank needs it, right? And you're thinking that way the water will be extra pure while I'm out of town. You're not even there to enjoy the benefit of this nice, pristine water. The reef might benefit from it, but what if something chaotic happens and you're leaving in another 12 hours? That's the problem. We don't want to have anything that could do anything weird. We don't want anything that could make our protein skimmer go crazy. Like, I don't know. I mean, I would even think about simplifying your reef. Like, for example, if you're big on filter socks, maybe while you're out of town you don't run socks so they can't overflow. Just remove that. If all is going well, certain reactors may not need to be on. They should be removed for cleaning, and then you'll reinstall them when you come back in a few days. Your tank, I mean, there's a lot of things our tanks can do without filtration for a while. I mean, think about it. When something really goes wrong and we're down to a box of water that we're just keeping flow in the tank, they can't have a protein skimmer, they can't have a calcium reactor or dosing or whatever. You know, everything's limited down to the essentials, you know, just heat, water, and flow, and food and light. Then we add all these other pieces of gear, but if those pieces of gear go wrong while you're traveling, that's something to be concerned about. Now, I'm not saying disconnect everything, but if you have something extra that's just not really essential, might be worth having it off while you're gone. And you can turn it off in advance and see how your tank responds. You could say, you know what? I mean, I'm just trying to think of some weird random thing, like UV. What if I don't run UV? Because what if the UV bulb cracks while I'm gone or something like that? So you just turn it off. How does your tank do without UV? You know, and then you could say, okay, I had it off while I was out of town. That kind of thing. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box here. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I mean, I keep everything running on my tank. I don't shut everything off, but I have someone come check on my tank every single day while I'm gone too. And they notice everything, which is really important. Thomas says, I'm draining the protein skimmer into a 1 gallon milk jug and looking at the water level in the sump, and the water level is not down. Do I still need to add more salt water? If you are draining a protein skimmer collection cup into a container, what's happening probably is your top off is adding more water to the tank to replace what's being lost by the protein skimmer. So right now, while you're fighting your protein skimmer, you should turn off your top off. So if you have an auto top off system of some kind, that should be unplugged or disabled temporarily while you're letting the protein skimmer drain. And then you can put a piece of tape on the front of your sump where the normal water line is in the sump, or you could have a Sharpie line, or you could have something that's been printed on a, what do you call it? One of those brother printers where you have some nice text and it says water line, and you just know what your water line is. And then with the top off turned off and the skimmer's wasting water, you would put in replacement salt water to maintain the water level at the same line it always is. If you're not doing top off, if your skimmer's just draining some water but there's no real change, you don't need to add more salt water to your tank. We're only replacing what we're losing. That's what I was saying. Like, for example, when my 280 gallon tank was treated for cyanobacteria, my collection cup held like a gallon of water. And I would take the cup off and dump it into a bucket and put it back on. And in 5 minutes, it was filled to the top, and I dumped it in the bucket and I put it back on top. And I did this over and over and over and over and over until the bucket was 5 gallons full of watery skimmate that really looked like water. It didn't look bad, but the skimmer didn't like it, and I just got rid of it. Well, at that point, I needed to put 5 gallons of salt water back into my sump to make up for all that water had wasted in 25 minutes flat. But then I had a second bucket next to the first one, and I kept dumping water from the collection cup into that because I was curious how much water total would I end up losing. And over a 6-hour period, because that's about how long it took me, it was 5 or 6 hours, I ended up dumping out of the cup a total of 14 gallons of water. And then the skimmer completely settled down. So I had to replace 14 gallons of salt water into the sump to keep everything running right. Now, I'm not saying drain 5 gallons of water out of your system before you add 5. But if your top off is turned off and you are dumping out the collection cup, you should see the water line getting lower and lower and lower in the return zone of your sump. And as that's happening, you would add more water to replenish it so the pump doesn't end up sucking in air, right? So that's what we're trying to do now, is we're just trying to keep up with the demand. So if it's pulling out 2 gallons now, or 1 gallon comes out, and you look at, and your tank's a 65 gallon, I don't know what size sump it is, or I definitely don't know what size your return zone is, but I would think a gallon missing should be visible. You should be able to notice that much is gone. But if it only took out 2 cups in the protein skimmer, because it's a small skimmer, you're not going to see a change in the sump yet. So dump out the cup, dump out the cup, dump out the cup, 6, 8, 9 times, and now look in the bucket, and maybe you've got about 2 gallons of water missing. At this point, you should be able to look in your sump and say, yeah, it's gone down an inch or 2. I need to add more salt water, and that's what you're trying to do. Selva says, can you recommend the best water test kit brand? I really like Elos. I've been using that one for probably 5 or 6 years. I mentioned that earlier in the stream. A lot of people like the Hana checkers because it's digital, so you can just read a number on the front versus trying to compare colors. But I still like the Elos. Salifert's another good one that's been around a super long time that you can trust. There are other brands on the market as well, but I lean into Elos. DC says, never assume everyone has the same common sense as you when caring for your pets. Explain everything in the smallest details. And that's true. You know, some people will go to a lot of trouble for their vacation trip, and they will actually make a binder. And inside the binder is feeding, lighting, heating, top off, and they have all these sections. So that way, if anything weird happens, they can actually, the tank sitter can actually look at the binder and hopefully read it and see what they can do to correct the matter if they can't get a hold of you. But primarily, the person coming to your home should be able to get a hold of you and say, hey, I just stopped by and there's this horrible noise. Or hey, I just stopped by and everything's dark. Or I just stopped by and everything's great. That's the message you'd love to hear, and that can be a text. But it is good to be told something's wrong and to contact you if something doesn't seem right. And it really helps if they're a person that knows the hobby. My son grew up around this hobby because it's what I've been doing for 24 years. And he would only notice the tank when his friends were there. Then he seemed to know everything. You know, he literally would identify stuff to them and like, wow. And I'm over on the sofa listening to him thinking, he actually absorbed that. That's good. But when I was traveling, that thing was a painting to him. It did not matter what was happening with the tank. And I'd have to call him and say, would you please feed the tank? Or would you please close the door to the garage because you're getting the tank too cold because you left the door open too long and the cold air is coming in. You know, it was things like that because I could see what's happening with the Apex. And I was just like, ugh, you're in the room playing a video game. Just turn your head to the right and notice the problem. So If the person knows the hobby, it helps a lot. And if you can't find anyone qualified, then you should contact the person at your fish store and see who they can send over that actually and pay for maintenance, where they can come take care of your tank like they do for all their clients. So remember, they won't do it the way you do it. They have their own set ways. But if they're keeping everything alive, then even if they kind of don't do it exactly the way you like, you can take care of that when you get home. Let's see. Selva says, I need someone who can guide me in settings of a saltwater tank. That sounds like someone that wants to learn how to set up a tank from scratch. If you go to milasreef.com and go to the section about newbies and saltwater, you'll see some of my articles that go into some really good basics. There's a really quick article called I Want to Set Up a Saltwater Tank that you could read. It'll take you like 5 or 10 minutes to read it. You have a cup of coffee and you can just absorb some very basic knowledge. And then I have a much more in-depth article that goes into all the different facets of making it super duper complicated to where you can set up a really good setup. But not everything has to be as complicated. It can be very simple initially, and you could have soft, corals. You could have no corals. You could have some rock, some sand, and some fish. That's a saltwater aquarium. But if you wanted to add things that live and grow like corals, then we want to pick things that are really easy. So there's a lot of information about that on this channel alone that you could go look through all the videos. There's something like 300 videos on this channel, and you could just pick a topic and just start listening and just start to learn. And a lot of it's going to go right over your head, and you're going to think, I didn't understand anything. But as you keep listening and watching more or listening to more, maybe it'll start to click and you'll start to get it. And that's like anything we try to learn. But the thing is, learn as much as you can before you spend a single dollar. That way you're not wasting money and you're not wasting lives. Kevin says, why would a tail spot blenny not die? I have 2 adult clowns, a yellow watchman, and a tiger pistol shrimp. No corals. It's about 2 years old and it's doing great. Oh, would. I saw why would it. I don't know. The question makes no sense to me. I just don't understand it. Are you saying, can I have a tail spot blenny with clownfish and a pistol shrimp and a watchman goby? I think you can. I don't know. That question confused me. Hillbilly Reefer says, once you've gone LED, you'll never go back. Yeah, I shouldn't have to. These lights should last forever. And let's find another question. Eric says, we need the return of the Mila's Reef coffee mug. Yes, I need to find a nice mug. This is the mug he's talking about. And my coffee is very cold. We've been at this for almost 2 hours. I didn't get 2 sips out of this. I love this mug because it's blue on the inside, black on the outside. I like the shape of it. I like everything about it. I didn't like the company that made it. And so I have to find a new company that can make an equivalent of that. That would be awesome. And I would love to do that for you guys. So I was talking with a friend about it recently, and he says, you could do the printing yourself. I'm like, what? He said, you can actually, and I never even thought to Google it, but if you find the ideal mug, you could just print that logo on yourself. I'm like, I don't know what machine that takes, but that's worth investigating too, because then I can just make mugs for the rest of my life and have a new career. But it's just, that company was so bad. They were so bad. They shipped out 2 huge boxes that were packed immaculately. And I opened it up and I was so impressed. I was like, wow, this is great. There was like a tray of cardboard with all the mugs in it, and they were cut out to fit around the mug and the handle, and then another matching one went on top, so they were so cocooned in they couldn't be damaged. But a couple broke, okay? That happens. I wasn't shocked. They're kind of, whatever that is, porcelain, things break, right? But what upset me was that only half of all the mugs I bought, 50% of them, the words were at an angle. And I was like, this is unacceptable. And I said, so I sent them pictures of these mugs with all the logo sideways, and I showed them pictures of the broken mugs that had happened. And then they told me at that time that we tell you when you buy it that if there's any breakage, we'll just refund the difference. And rather than guarantee you'll, like for example, if you order 64 mugs, you think you'll get 64 mugs, not 50 mugs and 14 are broken. But if 14 break, they'll reimburse you. You just have to prove that they're broken. But I was complaining about how the words were at an angle on the side of the mug. And they wrote me back several times saying, we don't guarantee placement on the mug. And I just said to them, guarantee placement? I didn't ask you where to put on the mug. It should go on the mug straight. And when you look at their catalog, every single picture in the catalog, everything's on correctly. And half of the order was done correctly, which meant the other half, they didn't care. That someone was in a hurry to go to lunch or something. I was like, let me just get this done. And they didn't care what they were doing. And I had all this stuff that was sloppy. And they said, well, you need to send us more pictures. So I sent them a ton of pictures. And then they kind of accused me of sending them multiple pictures of the same mug over and over. And how can I prove it that there's so many bad mugs? And I said, dude, I can take all the pictures you want. I can send you a picture of a trash can filled with half the order shattered if that makes you happy to know they were destroyed. I can ship back all the bad mugs on your dime and you can redo them. And so they said to me, as a one-time courtesy, we will go ahead and we will reprint the ones that were wrong. Well, good. That's your one job. Your job is to print mugs. Your one-time courtesy is a joke to me, right? So I said to him, you know what? The box holds 32. You're replacing 28. So I will go ahead and buy 4 more to fill the box completely. And they said, okay, and they took more money. And then I got this tiny box that looks like it came straight from China with all the mugs in it, the replacements, and there was like the skimpiest of cardboard divider. And when you picked up the box, it just sounded like, a garbage disposal of glass. So many broken ones in the replacement box. They sent me this gorgeous box with them packed in these perfect little cubbies. And then when they're trying to make me happy, they give me, the saying, it's the least I could do? I've been complaining about that saying my whole life. I always feel like I don't want the least you can do. I want the best you can do. So I feel like they did the least they could do. We'll reprint them a bunch of mugs. We'll put them in a horrible box with the least amount of padding so that the majority shatters, so he'll never bother us again. And I refuse to give them another dollar ever again. And so the mugs, the good ones were sold. The ones that were crappy were like, I think we did a thing at Mac now where we're giving away for a donation, like whatever you want to give us, or they were like $5 or something because they weren't perfect. I wasn't happy. And I felt guilty to charge a regular price for something that wasn't right. And I never want to give that company money again, But I can't find this mug with another company. I see lots of them, but not this one. So I would, that was a long answer, but I did want to tell you, I agree, Eric. I would love to do it again. It's been much, much too long. There's a lot of you guys out there, and I would like to put a nice quality mug in your hands that you can enjoy, that looks right, and matches the website colors. Oh, by the way, last week I talked about reef keeping not being easy. And wow, did you guys agree with me? There was so many overwhelming comments. Everyone saying, absolutely, I'm so glad you said something. And I was glad that I wasn't ranting to myself, ranting into a black hole. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's easy. There was like one guy that actually said on that video, I think it's easy. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. I don't know what you've got set up. Maybe you have a very easy setup. But yeah, Everyone agreed that it's really misleading to tell people reef keeping is easy. It's a lot of work. Hey, Ian, nice to see you on here. Ian's my friend from Florida. He helps me with video stuff. I'm looking for a question. That's why it's so quiet. I know sometimes you're like, why isn't he saying anything? Did the audio go out again? Hey, Kevin, that sounds great. Just send me an email at sales@milosreef.com and we'll get things going. Huh. So Jeff says Sony makes a printer to do coffee mug printing. I just need to buy the machine and then I'll have perfect logos. I want it to be perfect. Seriously, I hate when things are less than... Oh, look, we've all done it. I'm sure you've done... I'm wearing a shirt right now. This is a very nice shirt. I got it from Maui Diving and it's got corals on the front and I need to lose some weight, but it's got some fish and stuff. It's nice, right? And I have bought some stuff like this in the past, like, oh, I want this shirt, and I get it. And you put it on, you're like, oh, I got my new shirt, I love it. And it feels good. You know, I like the fabric and all that. And then you look at it and the entire art is angled or it's a little bit off to the side. And you're like, what? And you paid money for it. It should have been free. You know, it's like, it's not even a quality product. And, you know, I just rather it be right. Yeah. Danielle says, would a purple firefish get along with a royal gromma in a 70-gallon tank? Yeah, I think they would. I mean, they'll be territorial. They'll be separate ends of the tank. They won't hang out together like buddies, that's for sure. But those two are not like enemies. I think they'll be okay. The purple firefish is a different shape, and it's you know, it swims in the water column. The royal gromma likes to poke its head out of a hole in the rock work and will come out to feed and get back in. Might defend its, like I said, territorial that way, but I think you could actually put those two together. Do put a cover on your tank because firefish are well known for jumping and we don't want you to lose your beautiful fish. All right, we have been going for 2 hours and 12 minutes. There's 156 of us on here. I think we should wrap it up with a reminder that today is Water Test Saturday. Caitlin said, water tests save lives, and we definitely want you to keep your stuff alive and happy and healthy. I did all my water tests last night. I even read off my numbers to you guys, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, the tank's doing well. I'm happy with how things are going right now in that regard. That's good. I mean, I need some things to work on autopilot so I don't have to stress, because it's life's hard right now. I'm going to throw this clip on here. This is from Caitlin when she was in Hawaii in 2017. And she sent me this little clip, and I just love it. She was such a beautiful young lady, and she's gone far too soon. She was robbed of so much life. So I wanted to end the show on that, and I hope you guys have a nice weekend. And I hope that you hug your loved ones and that you take good care of yourselves. Bye, guys.